Good afternoon. Welcome back to the final section, final afternoon of this conference, Climate Investing, Transition to a Low-Carbon World. We have an excellent afternoon planned. I'll introduce our panel moderator momentarily. I just want to let you know just a few announcements. This being a university, there are an extraordinary number of things happening on campus, some of which are definitely related to the time that we've had together. These include that tomorrow, for those of you that will be on campus tomorrow, noted ethicist from NYU, Dale Jameson, will be speaking at 4 p.m. in Brattle 102. Professor Jameson is the author of Reason in a Dark Time that looks at some of the ethics-related issues with climate change. Also, our students are putting on a sustainability fair that will be held on Friday. So this will be in the North Quad from 4:30 to 9 p.m. So there'll be a farmer's market in the afternoon, and if you are interested in a dance and a concert, that'll be in the evening. So that will be on Friday. A couple of resources that we will mention, I'll mention now, and we will capture and put in the resources section of both the website and the app. Professor Ingrapera's book, Climate Change, A Wicked Problem, has now been published by Cambridge University Press. The subtitle is Complexity and Uncertainty at the Intersection of Science, Economics, Politics, and Human Behavior. It's an extraordinary, rich volume that captures many of the arguments that we've heard today. David Martin is the subject of a film called Future Dreaming that can be found at future-dreaming.org that looks at many of the leadership issues that have come up and been discussed here. So we'll continue to populate the resources section for the conference so that this can be an ongoing resource. And by next week, we will have, or I'm hoping even later this week, we'll just have to see, the videos from the keynotes and the panels will be posted as well on the university's YouTube channel that you can find the link to through the conference website and app. Now I'd like to introduce our panel moderator, Rachel Novick. And I want to just say that Rachel has been a tireless promoter of this conference, a real inspiration in terms of getting the word out to various networks, and has worked doggedly to help really enable this to happen. And thank you very much for that, Rachel. I really appreciate it. Dr. Novick is director of the minor in sustainability that we have here at the University of Notre Dame. That program is actually housed in our College of Science. She's a member of the Department of Biological Sciences and has a real expertise in developing sustainability criteria materials and leading organizational sustainability initiatives. She has research interests really focusing on sustainability education from the K through 12 level all the way up to the university level. And she's certainly applying that here in her job at Notre Dame, taking the minor in sustainability to new heights. Her PhD is actually in ecology and evolution, which she received from Yale. And it's also interesting, she's also a LEED certified professional, so has a perspective in terms of sustainability when it comes to either new construction or renovations. Please welcome Rachel Novick.
Thank you all so much. It's a tremendous honor to be here and to participate in this conference. I'm going to get started by introducing our first panelist, Benjamin Saydah. Ben has over 18 years of experience in the energy industry and with energy and biotechnology-focused startups. He gained extensive experience with BP, where he held positions in mergers and acquisitions, corporate strategy, and refinery operations. Prior to founding Carbon Strategies Incorporated, Mr. Saydah was the vice president of downstream at Sapphire Energy, a leading algae to crude oil biofuels company. And there he led the business and technical development of a new biocrude oil technology, including the development of commercial and technology partnerships. Ben received his MBA from Notre Dame and his bachelor's in chemical engineering from Ohio University. So please join me in welcoming Ben Saydah.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be on this panel, and I've enjoyed the conference. It's been a really excellent day and a half. What I'm going to talk about is new opportunities and new generation, or for the new generation that we have here. What I'm going to present is essentially a framework for looking at the options available to us to address the issues at hand as far as looking for a lower carbon world. I'm going to start by looking at the trends in reality that exist today. So the underlying trends that are calling us to action are that energy demand is increasing. Even as energy supply increases in the U.S., there's a desire for more sustainable energy. Again, even though we're balanced within the U.S. As far as energy, or within North America, national security still remains a concern. There's concerns over the safety of nuclear power. Historically, renewables have been one of the few issues that both Republicans and Democrats have agreed on. RFS was passed by the Republicans. The Democrats obviously have their views on green tech and lower carbon world. Governments, NGOs, general public around the world all support a lower carbon energy. And then we're increasingly seeing, including with the issuance by the Pope, energy use, climate change, and poverty are being tied together more and more as we move forward. However, the options for a lower carbon world aren't isolated from economic reality. We still have to do things that have a viable economic future. So governments around the world are fighting with deficits. It's only getting worse as in the U.S. and other countries go further into debt. How are governments going to support this? If investors looking to invest on the back of government regulation, how do we know they're not going to change? Poor countries are unable to pay for the high cost of a carbon tax potentially, and proposed solutions typically require significant R&D. Really, it comes down to timing is everything. You need to have a technology that works when the market's there, or have the fortitude to go through the gyrations of the economy to take a technology from an interesting idea to a viable economic solution. So with that basis, there's an opportunity to find economically attractive solutions to this problem. There's a pull from the market, there's a pull from governments, there's a pull from society. And so what are those opportunities, and how should we look at them? What I've done is I've grouped the lower carbon opportunities into three distinct areas. One is around alternative energy and raw materials. And while this list is not exhaustive, it does include opportunities around lower carbon power generation, around transportation fuels, and around bio and renewable feedstocks for plastics and other consumables that we use. There's opportunities around energy efficiency improvements. That's industrial, it's consumer, it's transportation, and it's also in just the overall reduction in the raw materials required to make a finished product. And finally, there's the opportunity to reduce emissions and to manage the waste that we produce. And that includes emissions to air, water, soil, and recycling of used materials. And then within that, there's also the opportunity around process control to avoid upsets and avoid the issues that sometimes cause uncontrolled releases. So I'm going to take one of these opportunities around biofuels and focus into how the value chain looks and how we can look at the different opportunities across the value chain. Within biofuels, you basically have somewhere between 4 and 6 different process steps to go from a biological material into a consumer experience of consuming and getting value out of a low carbon fuel. So, in the case of biofuels, there's crop development. You have to develop whatever crop it is, optimize it, a lot of times using biotech resources. You have to cultivate it, you have to harvest it, you have to supply it to the end user. You have to build whatever it is that you're going to use to convert that biological material into a transportation fuel in this case. You then have to actually operate and convert the material into a finished product, distribute it to the customer, and then the consumer experience has to either be similar to what they're seeing today, or you have to educate the consumer about why the new experience that they're having is better, or at least the same as what they've experienced to date. What I've shown on the bottom of this is not a list that I'm going to go through in any detail, but each of these process steps requires basically a different expertise in our economy, basically, that shows up in the form of different companies. For example, a seed plant biotech can be involved in the crop development, but they're probably not going to be involved in the conversion of that biomass to a finished product. They don't have the expertise in-house. If you look at, say, data management optimization company, they can actually provide expertise across most of the value chain here, and there's opportunities for them to create businesses that support each of those steps of the process. And both existing companies and startups can play in this. There's no reason why an existing biotech or agricultural company can't do it, and there's no reason why a startup can't do it. So there's a lot of opportunity across the value chain. For each of the 12 areas that I showed on the prior slide, you could create a similar value chain and similar opportunities. Really, it's just showing that there's a wealth of opportunities to play within this space, within the low carbon space. So why are we still struggling to have a lot of shots on goal that have been successful? I contend that there's an investment profile issue that's different than what our venture capitalist investors and what a lot of existing companies see when they invest in other opportunities. So what I've shown here is essentially two graphs. So the upper graph shows the confidence in future success. So at any point in an investment cycle, what is the confidence that the investors and the operating company has in the success of their venture? And across the x-axis, I have everything from an angel round, a Series B, a Series C, and then an ongoing investment when you've monetized your investment in either through an IPO or through an ongoing operation. You could also look at this as a time horizon, but to normalize it, I've done it by investment round. Your highest level of confidence is when you're sitting in the angel round going to get your first thing. At that point, you have very little data, but the data you have is giving you confidence that this idea is going to be the one that makes it. As you continue to raise money, you continue to do more and more research, and you continue to find flaws in your initial business. And those flaws are part of science, and that's what scientists do. They identify flaws in an idea, they identify solutions to those, and then they build the business up from those. So you hit a bottom point. The valley of death is the classic term for that. And maybe that's somewhere in your Series B going into your Series C round. You raise money on the idea that you're going to solve those problems, and you exit your Series C into an ongoing solution, or ongoing business with a viable technology. And what I've done on the bottom graph is tried to show the difference between the classic IT investment, the Facebook, the Google, the Lyft, the Uber of the world versus a clean tech investment. And there's a time horizon here too. So the financial rounds are shown here, not time. I think the time for a clean tech investment would be much longer than for an IT investment. And so investors have to come up with a new way of looking at investments. Both the time's going to be longer and the scale of the investment's going to be higher. You look at the green line there, cartoon line there showing the clean tech investment. As you move to your Series B, your Series C, and your ongoing investment, you have major capital investments to get a clean tech investment off the ground. There's hardcore R&D. You need to build R&D facilities. You need to get access to R&D facilities that you don't necessarily need to do for an IT investment that a lot of the Silicon Valley ventures that invested in clean tech of about 8 or 9 years ago maybe didn't realize, and maybe that's why some of them got burned. I think about the movie The Social Network, and Facebook, they started it in a house in San Francisco with some guys with laptops. You're not going to start a clean tech company with a bunch of laptops in a rented house in San Francisco. So the last thing I wanted to leave is a case for something different, a new way to maybe look at these opportunities, to try and couple the resources of a big company with the entrepreneurialness of a startup. So again, if you think about the 12 areas that I identified and then look at the value chain and all the opportunities along those value chains, there's an opportunity for large companies to work with startups and startups to work with large companies to overcome some of the investment hurdle to get from idea to commercial reality in a low carbon world. The graph on the bottom left there is from Khosla in a presentation he gave in 2011. And I like what it's showing there in that it shows on the y-axis the confidence in a probability of a technology succeeding. And then on the x-axis it has the, how disruptive is that technology going to be? How big of a change does it have on society, on our low carbon world? And what it basically shows is that you've got a lower probability of making a big disruptive change. It was his black swans of energy. And, a lot of times that shows up in the form of the ARPA-E investments versus on the left-hand side, which is a lot of what goes on in large corporations. Some of the rationale for that is large corporations are a lot of times, they have a lot of expertise, a track record of success, but their employees many times are risk averse. They're used to moving on to new projects. They're not there for the long haul. And while they have access to unlimited resources, they have existing businesses and existing shareholders that they're accountable to. Compare that to like a new startup venture. They have deep core subject matter expertise. They might be experts in biotech, but they might know nothing about commercializing a technology. So they lack the breadth that it sometimes takes to get something to market. They're unencumbered by past failures. They're unencumbered by past successes. They have an optimistic outlook on the future many times, but they have a hard time accessing financial resources and the technical depth or technical breadth they need to succeed. Compared to a large corporation, a lot of times in a startup, you have a singular focus. If this technology succeeds, I succeed. There's not another job to move on to. The next job is bankruptcy. So there's a singular focus, and that singular focus drives a future. And then there's the one downside is a lot of times in order to make a startup succeed, you have to move on to what pays the bills. And many times you can develop what you think is going to be a low carbon solution, and it turns into a non-climate based business, but yet a profitable business at that. So I think there's an opportunity for large corporations and new startups to find a way to work together to get over these hurdles that exist in bringing low carbon technologies to market.
Thank you, Ben. Now I'd like to introduce Mike Haggerty. Mike is an associate at the Brattle Group with experience in electricity wholesale market design, transmission planning, renewable and climate policy analysis, and strategic planning for utility companies. At Brattle, Michael has worked with regional transmission organizations across the U.S. in wholesale electricity market design and long-term transmission planning. Michael has also completed analysis for state agencies, utilities, and trade associations on the outlook and challenges of increasing renewable generation, the potential for the Clean Power Plan to impact reliability, and the greenhouse gas market in California under AB 32. Prior to Brattle, Michael worked for Honeywell in oil refinery commissioning and conducted research across the energy industry as part of the MIT Research Energy Initiative. Mr. Haggerty holds a BS in chemical engineering from Notre Dame and a master's in technology and policy from MIT. Please join me in welcoming Mike Haggerty.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for inviting me to be here. It's very inspiring to be here. It's great to step away from my normal job, which, as you heard and you'll see through my presentation, is in the weeds of the electric power sector, regulations and markets. I find all the ideas very inspiring and hope to carry that with me going forward. So I'm excited to be here to present my perspective on the current and future power sector investments, especially with the clean power plan that has been finalized just this last month, and will be people will start working on compliance with that over the next few years. There are very significant changes already underway in the electric power sector. Some of those, just to touch on them, include low natural gas prices, the renewable rollout that's occurring currently, environmental regulations and demand-side technologies, and we've heard about a couple of these already. As these continue to roll out and as they expand, it will require changes to the regulations, to the markets, and to the planning approaches, and that's something that I really enjoy doing. The industry, however, needs long lead times, and I think the comparison to the telecom sector is very attractive, trying to figure out how to get there. I hope there's a way to move in that direction. I'm not sure we can get all the way there, but that certainly is, we're hopeful that we can get a little bit faster in some of these changes. But it's also capital intensive and very focused on reliability and cost effectiveness. The exciting thing with the Clean Power Plan is that the objectives are changing a bit by adding a carbon limit. As a conservative industry that tends to over-design for reliability and for cost effectiveness, adding a new standard which reduces carbon emissions, you hope that being conservative there will not only meet the standards that have been set, but that they may go further. So another reason I'm inspired is as may have mentioned, the Pope Francis's encyclical. Reading through it, I was especially moved by this, as a consultant, moved by this quote, that a fragile world entrusted by God to human care challenges us to devise intelligent ways of directing, developing, and limiting our power. So I hope to be a part of that, different ways to find intelligent ways to do this. And I was lucky enough to take that picture of Pope Francis myself last week at the National Basilica. It was a great event, and I hope everyone got to see a piece of it. So I want to move into some information about the current amount of investment that's occurring in the electric power sector for new generation capacity. There's a lot of investment that I don't highlight here on energy efficiency and demand response, but I'm focusing here on new generation plants. And you can see here that we have a lot of investment occurring for natural gas plants. CCs is a combined cycle, which is a more efficient, higher capacity factor unit. The GT is a gas turbine that's primarily meant for peaking. But combining the under construction and permitted plants, over 35,000 megawatts, which amounts to about $35 billion of investment. So what's driving this? The low gas prices that I mentioned before. We're currently, the Henry Hub price today is $2.50 per million BTU. Forward curves show it staying in the $2 to $4 range through the mid-2020s. So as far as what we know today, this is a trend that's going to continue. And that puts a lot of pressure on energy prices. It keeps energy prices low, puts pressure on other generators. Another reason that this is happening is the pressure that applies to coal plants. This year alone, there'll be 15 gigawatts of coal retirements. There's already been about 12 gigawatts over the last few years, and another 20 that have already been announced over the next few years. So there really should be a negative bar showing coal going the other way. But what I want to highlight there is that natural gas plants are largely being added to maintain reliability standards. Most of the investment in that under construction region is in the mid-Atlantic, where capacity markets, the markets that are used to incentivize new capacity, have provided the incentives for new capacity to come online. Moving to the right, we have the first new nuclear plants currently coming online in the southeast. It's about 5,000 megawatts there. And it'll be really interesting to see coming out of that where the costs fall. Those are being built in regulated utilities that are able to recover their costs. Cost overruns may be a different story, but largely have the certainty that they'll be able to recover their costs and pay for a higher cost capacity. Nuclear at this time is 3 to 5 times more expensive per megawatt of capacity than natural gas, which is why you see natural gas being installed so much greater. As you move to the right, you can see that the renewables are really the next set of resources that are coming online. Wind here shows 10,000 megawatts currently under construction. What's driving that is renewable portfolio standards at the state level. Going forward, the major market for this is the Mid-Atlantic, the PJM market, where there's going to need to be 20 to 30 gigawatts of additional wind and solar capacity to meet their future renewable portfolio standards. Moving forward, we just have California passing a 50% RPS. So even though they have already largely made the investments and signed contracts to meet their 2020 goal, they're expanding further into the future to 50%. So where we're seeing wind currently being installed, however, is in the Midwest, in the region that's called the Southwest Power Pool, in Kansas and Oklahoma, as well as Texas, because this is where the resources are the best. They're pushing a 50% capacity factor, which is, if you compare that to the average natural gas CC, which is a plant you're able to turn on and turn off, could potentially run at 100%, on average run closer to 40 to 50%. So the fact that your wind resources are now able to reach similar capacity factors in specific regions of the country is pretty impressive. So the wind installation, including the permitted, is about $50 billion of investment. Solar is quickly catching up. This is utility scale solar here only. I was looking at the SEIA, the Trade Association for Solar website, and I think if you added DG Solar, distributed solar, it'd be about twice as high.
That's what I wrote down, 12,000 megawatts.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on there, and what's driving that is in some places renewable portfolio standards, especially in North Carolina, is a state that is getting a lot of solar because of their RPS, and they don't have much in the way of wind resources, as well as net metering, allowing for retail rates to the revenue to be the revenue source instead of the wholesale rates. One interesting aspect of a recent project with the transmission planner in Texas was that we were working with them on projecting over 10 to 20 years their power system and the transmission builds for that, and we're trying to get them to think about a larger set of scenarios. So they ended up modeling about 6 future scenarios. And in each of them, there was 10 to 15 gigawatts of solar being installed over that time frame, which is pretty impressive, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So I also want to touch on transmission investment. Transmission investment has been growing over the last 10 years quite significantly. To the point where in 2014 there was almost $20 billion of investment in that year. And you can see that the Edison Electric Institute's projections have consistently risen with the amount of investment that's occurred in the year that they do the projection, so that they're now estimating that this amount of investment continues through 2017. Analysis that we have done of the transmission system and the transmission needs find that there's likely to be $120 to $160 billion of investment over the next decade in the transmission system. And the drivers for that investment is actually there's a lot of old lines that need to be upgraded. But in addition, as you change the generation mix, you're changing the location of the flows and how they reach demand. That requires upgrades to accommodate that and maintain reliability. In addition, you're seeing some interregional projects. The challenges here are finding ways to improve transmission planning. This is something that we've worked on across several markets, trying to find ways to include a wider set of benefits. Currently, transmission is planned primarily for reliability, and that is a figure that Bill Hederman showed earlier. And I thought 50% was relatively low in my understanding, because reliability is really the main reason that transmission is built. But there's a broader set of benefits, and I think the driver for this maybe initially was the need to build transmission to connect renewables in the middle part of the country to the load centers. But we're finding that there's a much broader range of reasons to build transmission to reduce costs. And FERC Order 1000, which has been implemented over the last few years, has started to move the ball in this direction. Where it's unclear to us whether the changes that have been required will be sufficient, but it's moving in the right direction. But there's still probably most likely there's more work to be done. So next, I want to move and really talk just a few more minutes about the Clean Power Plan and what we're seeing about the standards that have been set by the EPA. First, I just want to touch on what their modeling shows for emission reductions. We're seeing that this is historical emissions from 2010 to 2013. It jumps a few years along the red bars based on the years that they modeled. But looking at the base case to the policy case, you can see that there's an additional 20% reductions in emissions. Sometimes the Clean Power Plan is people say that you're really only locking in the business as usual case. If you model it differently, that might be true, but and some of the other drivers that are still developing, like renewable costs, might push us there. But I think the reason to be optimistic about this is the fact that there is a limit that now has to be met, has to be thought about by every utility planner, and that will be a part of their planning going forward. So I want to compare these reductions to AB 32. AB 32, the California program, is looking to their future cap, which has not yet been codified in the legislature, is to get to 40% reductions based on 1990 levels, so which amounts to closer to 45% comparable here to the Clean Power Plan. So Clean Power Plan for the electric sector, it's only electric sector. AB 32 is economy-wide, but is achieving almost 2/3 of the reductions of AB 32, which is certainly thought of as a very progressive policy. So there's a lot of details within the Clean Power Plan. We comment sometimes that it's really a rule that only a consultant can love, because there's a lot to figure out, there's a lot to understand, there's a lot to explain. But I want the basics of it is that the standards will start in 2022, and there's which has been pushed back from 2020, and they will need to achieve a gradual reduction to 2030. They're being set on coal plants and natural gas plants. States, however, have a decision of whether they apply those on an average basis on specific plants, or they can also convert it to a cap-and-trade program. What I want to show here is this is on a statewide average basis, which can give you an idea of, at the top bar, where the states are starting in terms of emission rate standards. The red portion shows what they need to do to achieve the initial target in 2022. The teal part is what they then need to get from 2022 to the final standard. The gray bar there is the interim standard. So what they actually need to comply with is the interim standard and the final standard. But you can, if the 2022 goal is really low, then there'd really only be one standard. So you can see that the coal-heavy states to the left are the ones that are required to achieve the most emission reductions. States that have less of that are more natural gas heavy to the right. And we'll see there's some very significant unknowns here. each state will have a decision on how it will comply. As I said, there's a rate-based approach where you are able to reduce your rate standard outside of fence, what are called emission reduction credits, where you're able to essentially pack your denominator of your rate with these emission reduction credits from renewable energy, from energy efficiency. And then under a mass-based standard, it would be similar to a cap and trade program. So exactly what the states will do. Another important question, how many of the states will do a similar policy? Because the more states you have doing a single policy, the more efficiencies you can gain from trade. And then also, there's opportunities to join AB 32 and Reggie. We'll see how that shakes out. One of the big potential, we're talking about carbon taxes and carbon prices before. There's potential here that by 2022 we will actually have 4 different carbon markets in the U.S. Based on the Clean Power Plan. That you'll have AB 32 in California, Reggie in the Northeast. That you have states that are rate-based that are trading these ERCs, emission reduction credits, and that you'll also have the Clean Power Plan cap and trade program. So that has potential for many distortions across the electricity market. But hopefully with a price signal like that, there'll be opportunities for people to join up and find more efficient ways to meet the standards. So the last thing I want to do is touch on reliability. Oh, sorry, I'm in control here. I forgot that. Many of the trends. This is a few takeaways on the impacts. Energy prices will increase in the mass-based under mass-based caps because all emitters will need to pay for the allowances. Rate-based, it may be higher or lower depending on whether your natural gas plants that are setting prices need to take on additional costs. Many of the trends that we see currently are exacerbated. And one disclaimer I should put on this is that these are based on EPA's analysis, which is the only broad analysis that's been done on this, but there are assumptions that may not come to fruition, such as the amount of energy efficiency that they've assumed, which is quite significant. However, the renewables modeled result in 80 gigawatts, just to add some perspective on our previous numbers, 80 gigawatts in the 2016 to 2030 timeframe, which is 20 gigawatts more than the base case. And that might be higher if they don't achieve the same amount of energy efficiency investment. So there are reliability issues. I'm not going to go through. There's a lot of details here. But these are concerns of the industry that are what they normally put out as reasons not to pursue these, but there are real issues here. The 4 major ones are resource adequacy, transmission security, gas-electric coordination due to the additional natural gas usage, and integrating renewable energy. So I'm happy to discuss these with anyone after this or during the discussion later on, but I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. And now it's a pleasure to introduce a fellow South Bend resident, TJ Kanczuzewski. TJ is a founding member of Inovateus Solar LLC, and as president, he oversees the company's operations, sales, development, and administration. Inovateus Solar has been successful in deploying photovoltaic projects throughout the United States as well as international distribution sales. In 2010, on behalf of Inovateus Solar, he accepted the Indiana University Sustainability Award and the Indiana Companies to Watch Award by Governor Mitch Daniels. And he was recently honored in 2013 as the 40 Under 40 recipient for Northern Indiana and Southwestern Michigan. Prior to his career at Inovateus Solar, TJ worked for General Growth Properties in Chicago. He graduated from Columbia College with a Bachelor of Arts in Business Management. Please join me in welcoming TJ.
Thanks, Rachel. And thank you, Leo and team, for putting this event together. This is fantastic. 10 years ago, I thought that there would never be an event like this at Notre Dame. So it's definitely an honor and a pleasure to be here. I wanted to sort of base my presentation around the experience that our company has had in solar energy. We focus on photovoltaics. That's basically solar electricity. And so I kind of wanted to talk to you today about what we've done as a company rather than what I think we'll do in the future. And I think that in terms of new opportunities and a new generation, I think we're in the midst of an energy revolution. And at Inovateus Solar, we're sort of on the front lines where we're helping customers become their own utilities and generate their own electricity. And it could be a struggle from many different angles. And I'll talk a little bit about that because this is a different way of thinking about how you get electricity. And there's psychology and a lot of other things involved. But anyway, this picture here, this is an IKEA distribution center that's in Maryland. It's a 5 megawatt rooftop installation, and these are types of installations that our company gets involved in. Our purpose at Inovateus Solar is to secure a brighter energy future for our customers, ourselves, and the universe. It used to be the world, but I changed it to the universe because someday we may become interplanetary species. Obviously, that's forward thinking, but who knows? If we live on other planets, we should take care of those too. One thing I want to talk about quickly, and it's kind of been a struggle for us at Inovateus Solar when we work or talk to anybody. It's the fact that as consumers, we want to buy the cheapest electricity possible. And that's the goal in many cases. And we find some of our customers, they'll buy solar energy as long as it's cheaper than the current form of electricity that they use. And as we're changing, as we're entering a new generation and looking at new opportunities, Michael kind of touched on it in his presentation, but we need to look at healthier forms of energy, forms that have less CO2 emissions. And so, there's so many things in life that people talk to me about that they don't necessarily choose it because it's the cheapest thing possible. I mean, how many people in here bought their cars because it was the cheapest car possible? How many people, went to Starbucks to get a coffee because it was the cheapest coffee possible? How many people, bought their house because it was the cheapest house possible? And so it's really tough for me sometimes being in the solar energy sector to always get questioned, and people want it to be the cheapest electricity possible. And in some cases, to even get customers to do solar energy in the past, we had to donate it because they didn't want to pay for it. And so it's really a change in thinking, and I think we need a balanced electrical diet. I think we're getting there. I think we got a long way to go. Just to tell you quickly a little bit about our company, we're based in South Bend, Indiana. We were founded in 2005. We were originally part of Inovateus Development, and then we broke off as Inovateus Solar in 2008. We primarily do roof mount, ground mount, carport, and we're now getting into microgrid projects and even off-grid solar energy projects. And our company tries to provide a complete solution with engineering, design, the construction, finance. If a customer wants to do solar energy, we can work with them from the very first conversation to leaving them with an operating solar system, and even being able to maintain it for them if they'd like so. But I think that in this new generation, there's opportunities for a lot of new entrepreneurs, a lot of small businesses, new technologies. And I listened to the last panel discussion, and Sam talked right at the end, someone asked a question, and he talked about sacrifice. And at Inovateus Solar, we might not, be making money hand and fist, but we are sacrificing for the industry. We're sacrificing for a change in what I consider and others consider the energy revolution. So in order to be a leader in this new generation of Inovateus Solar. Started as a small company with just a few employees, back in 2008. I think it's really important that no matter what you do or where you're at, you have to understand your core values. And our core values at Inovateus Solar, the acronym is PEACE. It actually, wasn't set up for the acronym to be PEACE. It just so happened that way. But it's passion, engage, ambition, creativity, and esprit de corps, or spirit of the team. And touching on that, to tell you about what we've been able to do and the challenges that we've faced. I mean, our team has a lot of passion for what we do. And we like to share that passion wherever we can. And when we first got started, there weren't a whole lot of solar energy opportunities in the South Bend area, nor did we focus on South Bend. We focused on the world. And so when we started off as a company, we primarily worked in distributing the solar products, but we quickly realized that customers, they didn't just need the solar products, they needed somebody that could provide them all the other services. So we quickly branched out, and we've done installations all across the United States. We just finished a large off-grid project in the Caribbean. We're working on opportunities in South America, Central America, but we've also distributed product, all throughout the world. Engage. We have to be engaging as a company with everybody that we interact with. And that includes the people that we are buying materials from, our vendors, our partners. And on this next page here, I'll show you, some of the customers or companies that we've worked with. And we have to be very engaging because we are changing the way, or we're a part of the change in how they generate electricity. So we're even working with utilities. And we are a group of very passionate team members, and we have to work within the constraints of utility regulation, or regulation of a large corporation. And sometimes our core values don't necessarily match up with the core values of the companies that we're working with. But we have to be very engaging, because a lot of times this is the first time this company has done solar energy. We want it to be a good experience. And we have to hold their hand and explain to them how solar energy works and make it happen. I have a picture here. We did a pilot project on the engineering, the Fitzpatrick Hall of Engineering here at Notre Dame about 5 years ago. So I had to throw that picture up there too. We have worked with Notre Dame, and definitely I really applaud the new mission that Notre Dame has in terms of energy and what it's looking for in the future. I think it's great, and it's definitely going to help push Notre Dame forward, and I think it will help generate some new leaders, maybe students that are here at Notre Dame that are going to see this new initiative that Notre Dame has, and hopefully start their own businesses or their own technologies in the future. So definitely think it's a good thing. As a company, we are ambitious. Ambition is a big part of renewable energies and running a solar energy company, because we run into obstacles every day, because we're trailblazing. We're doing new things that haven't been done before. So we have to work with engineers. We're always hiring engineers that can help us design very creative solutions. We have to be ambitious when we're putting our financial models together. And so we are working really hard on that. This is a picture of a project that we completed last year in the Caribbean. It's a 1 megawatt off-grid system for Cuisinart's resort on an island, which is Anguilla. And they took 1 megawatt off-grid because they have to produce their own water, because water is very expensive, and also electricity is expensive as well. Electricity there is about 45 cents a kilowatt hour, so it's very expensive for them to make water. So we worked with them and put these parts and pieces together to do 1 megawatt off-grid, and it was challenging. Their utility didn't want them to do that, and they were still going to be connected to the utility at this system, and everything was completely off-grid, but the utility decided not to reconnect because they didn't understand what was happening here. So a lot of challenges, but we have to be creative as well in coming up with our approach and how to do installations. We have done 3 of the largest rooftop installations in the country, and we had to get super creative on every one of those. Every step of the way, from when we started the conversations through construction till the very end, because it was something those companies hadn't done before, and it was something that we hadn't done before necessarily either. Being creative, we are now working with Michigan State on doing a 13 megawatt carport installation. And so we had to get creative and come up with these carports on some existing parking lots that they have. And so, we have to be creative within our team, but also with our customers. I guess it kind of falls back to being engaging. But there are so many different applications for solar energy. A couple examples here. We did an installation at the Shed Aquarium. And the Shed Aquarium is a historic building in Chicago that had all of these requirements that were so ridiculous. And we had to overcome all these requirements just to put solar on. The requirements almost read, "Do not put solar on this building." And somehow they came up with those ideas 100 years ago when they built the Shed Aquarium. So we had to get creative in doing that installation. The other picture is there's 10 megawatts of rooftop systems we did in Indianapolis on top of some Duke Realty buildings. I already showed you the picture of the IKEA project, but we're now doing a lot of ground mount installations. We just completed one in Dublin, Georgia for Georgia Power. We have the second one on the way, which is Ronin Solar, that's about a 20 megawatt installation. But in order to do what we do and to make the sacrifices we make, we have to have a strong team. And I think any company that's going to do renewable energy or is going to help others do renewable energy, they have to have a really strong team and they have to have great people on board. And so we try to have as much fun as we possibly can at Inovateus, and we try to attract talent that is going to help us to have fun. And last year we were rated 18th by the Indiana Chamber of Commerce in the top places to work. We are just under 40 employees and growing every day. We're currently about a top 20 solar installer in the United States, but our goal is to be a top 5 by 2023. So thank you very much. Look forward to panel discussion.
And now I'm going to introduce our last panelist. Tom Matzzie founded Ethical Electric in 2011 with the belief that everyone should have easy access to renewable wind and solar energy. Throughout his career, he's developed powerful online communities designed to disrupt incumbents. He's pioneered innovations that are now considered best practices in civic engagement, and he's raised over $150 million for various organizations. Before starting Ethical Electric, Tom was a principal at Gladius Strategy, LLC, and the Washington director of MoveOn.org. And he was the director of online organizing for the Democratic National Committee as well. A graduate of Notre Dame, Tom was named a rising star by the New York Times Magazine for his innovative work with MoveOn.org. Please join me in welcoming Tom.
Thanks, I'm really happy to be here. As Rachel described, I'm a refugee from politics. So now working to change the world in a different way through energy. I'm really inspired by everything I've heard in the last day and a half. I think the first thing, I want to tell you a little bit about my company, but I really want to tell you a positive story, which is that low carbon is winning. I think it will win. It's really just a matter of timing and whether or not we can do it in time, to save the planet. And let me tell you, let me go through the story here a little bit. First, about my company, we are a direct-to-consumer retail renewable energy provider. So we operate as a deregulated energy supplier in 9 states currently. We also, so we sell green power to customers. We buy a lot of power from NextEra, actually, through our trading operation. Our value proposition to customers is you purchase renewable energy for your home without a home improvement project or long-term commitment. So that's the basics of it. And the inspiration was going solar on my own home in Washington, D.C., and it took 11 months. We had to fight the utility for the net meter. I realized there's a lot of privilege associated with being able to tolerate a home improvement project like that. I had to have the risk tolerance for someone climbing on my roof with drills. The income if something went wrong. My roof had to be pointed in the right direction, not shaded by a tree, made of the right roof material. I paid cash, but if I used a financing product, I had to have credit score of 680 or better. So there are a lot of reasons people are not capable or not able to go solar today. And in fact, if you follow the solar industry really closely, they have customer acquisition costs north of $4,000, all the marketing and sales to get one sale. Some companies are as low as $2,500. But that kind of points to the inefficiency of trying to put solar on every home as a way to kind of build renewable energy. In fact, our greatest solar company in the country, Solar City, is 250,000 customers, which is tiny. We are fourth largest in our category. After only 30 months, we're forecasting 80,000 customers by the end of the year. And we're launching new products now. Community solar is the first one. So unlike our current product, which is sold at a slight premium to the utility rate, community solar, we'd be able to give customers a permanent long-term discount. Now, we would ask you to make a long-term commitment to buy from that community solar farm in order for us to give you that discount. So you get both the environmental benefits as well as an economic benefit. And we're also working on new products that do the same thing. But enough about my company. Actually, I do want to point one other thing, which is that this sort of green power purchasing, the leading companies in America are deciding to do this voluntarily. Part of it is some of them are worried about long-term exposure to carbon risks. But, Google, probably the most innovative company on the planet, is aiming for 100% renewable energy. They buy a staggering amount of wind power today, and they're turning an abandoned oil and gas field into an 82 megawatt solar farm. Walmart has solar installed on more than 240 stores. And they're doing it strictly for business reasons. It's cheaper than the power that they buy from the grid. So this is a growing trend, people to voluntarily purchase renewable energy. Let me say this, that there are revolutionary changes are coming, and we need entrepreneurs to address them. I think that's a really important piece here is we actually do not have enough people building these new business models and going out there to do these things to address the challenge we have. I see a couple mega trends through a couple different categories. Efficiency, I see two mega trends. One is cloud computing, and the second is hyperlocal energy price signals. And those could become carbon signals in a new regulatory regime. But I think we actually understate how big of a revolution cloud computing has been in the last 5 years. The ability, we as a company analyze 40 terabytes of data every few hours. 10 years ago, we would have had to have a room full of servers with a guy there who's swapping out drives to do that sort in our own dedicated server facility somewhere in Northern Virginia or Texas or North Carolina. Today, we can spin up a new Amazon Web instance, a web services instance in a few minutes. So cloud computing is absolutely revolutionary in how it's having an impact on these industries. In energy production, the two mega trends I see are obviously the shift to renewables, and the second is towards distributed generation versus central station generation. And I think that actually is going to continue to be a trend. It will especially be a trend, I suspect, in the developing world, where they're going to skip the putting up the poles and wires and just move to smaller microgrids, which is a form of distributed generation, to provide power to. And it doesn't mean that central station has no role to play. It's just a different role, more like an insurance company and less like managing all your risks every day of paying your bills, etc. Transportation, I see two mega trends here. Transportation as service through ride-sharing services like Uber and Lyft are creating new patterns of consumer behavior, right? I live in a city, I put 5,000 miles a year on my car. I mostly take public transportation or use a ride-sharing service, and I only take my car mostly because I live in Washington, D.C., and I go out to the Chesapeake Bay for the weekends to enjoy the bay. And the other trend on transportation is autonomous vehicles. Okay, this sounds like scary where we're going to get all run over by some computer. It's not that. This is, you have to think electrified fleets of autonomous vehicles that can be deployed using computer algorithms for the maximum efficiency in terms of fuel or however you want to describe it, whatever the efficiency goal is. And those fleets can step into those new behaviors, right? So it might not be that you buy an electric car, but for 40% of your car trips, you might use one of these ride-sharing services in an autonomous electric vehicle. Or all of your packages being delivered to your home might be driven by something like that. One thing I want to point out, I've added this after Doug Ford this morning talked about the BP station with all the heavy switchgear in the back room for going electric. That's a picture right there of an N-phase microinverter, the M215. It weighs 1.6 kilograms, and the dimensions are 171 millimeters by 173 millimeters by 30 millimeters. Anyone that describes renewable energy technology as like inefficient, you're going to have all this infrastructure investment. There are companies that are inventing something the size of a CD case that does technologically what it took a room full of equipment to do 20 years ago. Maybe not a room full of equipment, but something the size of a television. It's just an important point to make. And in fact, I have 22 of those on my roof. Now this is growth in investments, not the kind of notional value of the investments. The growth in investments is going mostly towards renewables globally. That's an important trend to understand if you're an investor. This is where the smart money is going because they're looking for not just yield but also growth returns, right? So think of whatever your return profile is that you're looking for. Another thing, let me ask you a question. If I asked you what happens to energy costs over time, we would all say they go up. It's kind of an assumption, right? But not if you work in wind energy or solar energy. That's what's going on with wind energy and solar energy, is that costs are rapidly falling. And the reason is because there are no fuel costs, this is technology, right? This is not energy price translated as a fuel cost. Most energy prices, electricity prices, just reflect the underlying fuel cost. But solar and wind do not have any fuel cost. And so they are technology. So the better and more efficient that we can develop the technology, the lower the price of the energy will be over time. And this is new in the last, I saw this morning from Green Tech Media. Was in the last couple of weeks?
No, I saw it this morning too.
You saw it this morning as well?
Yeah, I saw it too.
So this is utility solar beating natural gas, right? So all that notional value of those investments being made in combined cycle gas plants. This raises a question as whether or not those are good investments. And the trend is not actually in 2015 or 16 or 17. What you see is, given the black line there with the big gray around it, that's the forward price of natural gas, right? So the forward price is forecast to be higher than today's current market prices, right? So you have the embedded, this is the embedded dollar per megawatt hour price of a combined cycle gas plant. Is that right?
It's probably the bid.
The bid price, okay. And then there's a range, which is the gray there, right? Because gas prices are extremely volatile. As someone who works in the electricity industry with a trading desk, I would never bet my business on the price of natural gas. Very volatile. Then you see the orange line, which is last year's PPA prices for solar. The green line is this year's PPA prices for solar. They are 20% lower this year than they were last year. Right? That trend's only going to continue. And the price goes down over time. There's no escalating forward curve like there is for natural gas. So I don't know. There's an old phrase a banker told me once is don't take collateral you have to feed. I'm not sure I'd buy the power plant that I have to buy fuel for. Now, the good news about wind power, it is a major provider in several states. So these are the percentage of generation from wind in each of those states. This is from the American Wind Energy Association annual report of last year's data. This year's will be even better. Over 20% of electricity year-round in Kansas, Iowa, and South Dakota comes from wind power. And at times greater than 60% in Colorado and 40% in Texas. Right? This is the story the whole you can't do it all with renewables. You can't do a lot of it with renewables. There are places in this country today where a large chunk or the majority of their power at certain times of the day is coming from renewables. And the grid hasn't exploded in those places, by the way. Worldwide, China is now the leader in wind. You can see it's skyrocketing in terms of megawatts deployed. In Spain, wind output now exceeds coal. India targeting 60,000 megawatts by 2022. This is year-and-a-half-old data. So, and then you have offshore installations expanding, and obviously development in Latin America as well. Now, here's a trend that I think is very important to understand, which is what's going on with battery prices. On the right, you have that's the free fall in the price of solar PV, right? So we all know this trend a little bit, which is solar gets cheaper and cheaper every year. On the left, you have the projections for battery prices. Batteries are technology too. There's no, there are some underlying, there's underlying chemistry and alloys, et cetera, that are parts for the batteries, but it's technology, and so its trend line is going to be similar to that of solar. You'll have declining trends rapidly happening. And I think 2 points to understand about solar. A big part of the decline in solar prices was not exactly technology development. It was manufacturing and commodification. It was just bringing the production of PV to an industrial scale. And so batteries will experience the same thing. One piece I want to poke at is this myth of intermittency. Okay, the people who operate the electric grid are really, really smart people. Like, I mean, I'm blown away by how smart they are. I visited the control room at PJM in New York ISO. These people are really smart. They overbuild like crazy. That's the downside to it. But the grid is not going to blow up if we have 50, 60, 70% renewables. Those very smart people will figure out how to manage that problem. And an example of this is in Germany. You see here, Germany hits 59% renewable peak. The grid does not explode, right? And you have record solar output in Germany pushes average German peak price below baseload. That's astounding, the peak price of electricity dropping below the baseload price. So intermittency, I think it is a challenge if you run an electric grid of transmission that you have to be planning for. It is not a societal challenge like climate or carbon, right? Those are societal challenges, not like business planning challenges. Business planners have to figure out how to deal with problems like intermittency and managing their supply chain. Policy, just makers have bigger power problems than that. Now, given that I've shared all this great news that there's opportunity ahead, I want to now delve into policy a little bit, which we've had a debate about the carbon tax. I think there's a really important innovation here, and I can't take no credit for it. Leo, who was our friend who came up with this? Peter Barnes, right? Who is a former entrepreneur and economist. And the idea is you do a large carbon tax, sufficiently large price signal to actually impact patterns. And instead of pocketing the money or diverting it to the treasury and that then politicians will fight over, you give people a dividend. You just give it back, right? So you implement the price signal so it changes the behavior. And the obvious example here is the Alaska Permanent Fund. You see 2015 Permanent Fund payment of $2,072, or as they call it in the Alaska, my Hawaiian vacation, which is actually what they do with the money, a lot of them. So there's an equitable way to implement a carbon tax that gives a price signal and also starts to help low income and moderate income people in this country, and provides almost like a basic income. Radical topic, right? For consumers. So that's my overall message is, one, I think it's of hope and vision. A couple other points I just really quickly want to say. Notre Dame has been transformative and formative in my life. My father's a Notre Dame alumnus, and I was here on campus, and was imbued with a lot of values that, I spent 15 years in nonprofit work before becoming an entrepreneur. And I want Notre Dame to be a leader on climate solutions. And I think it's important that Notre Dame uses its moral leadership to be a leader on climate solutions. And the importance of avoiding climate catastrophes is significant. Climate catastrophes will be devastating to the most vulnerable people on this planet. Not just our ecology, the amount of human suffering that is associated with climate catastrophes is astronomical. And I really want the university to provide that moral leadership. I do think there are two important steps the university could take in addition to its announcement to wean itself off coal, which seems slow to me but necessary. So the first step would be to transform the campus into a model of sustainability and alternative energy, renewable energy production. And of course, the second will be to divest its $10 billion endowment from fossil fuels. Most importantly, as a moral statement about the necessity of climate action to avoid climate catastrophes. And I believe the university should take those actions. And I'm willing to stay involved as a volunteer, as a donor and philanthropist, to continue to support the university's move towards providing that climate leadership, so I hope they take up the challenge. Thank you.
Rachel, I think what we'll do is we'll take 2 questions, and then we won't take a break. We'll go immediately into Carolyn Wu, okay?
Okay, so just 2 questions. Yes, Frank?
And it has to do with the clean power plant.
Bill.
On the initial version of this power plant, the standard for emissions from new coal-fired power
Where's Carolyn?
plants was set
Where's
at
Carolyn Wu?
11.
Where's Carolyn Wu? Oh, she is. Okay.
I'm sorry?
I see.
Was set at 1,100 pounds per megawatt hour. In the final version, that was raised to 1,400 pounds of carbon dioxide per megawatt hour. And I can't remember quite the jargon, but the terms were used that in raising it to 1,400, it was something that could be achieved at acceptable costs with existing technologies.
That was on the new standard.
The new standard. And the clean power plant, the new clean power plant, also said that with the best technology available using supercritical pulverized coal power plants, you could get by at 1,700 pounds of carbon dioxide per megawatt hour. My calculations, even under the best of assumptions, says it's closer to 1,800. But in any event, the difference is 300 to 400 pounds of carbon dioxide that you're going to have to separate from the exhaust stream per megawatt hour. Going further with my own calculations, even being generous with the assumptions, it's going to cost at least $10 per megawatt hour to capture that carbon, probably more likely a little bit more than $20 per megawatt hour. To me, that puts the nail in the coffin on construction of new coal-fired power plants. I know your organization has looked at the clean power plant extensively. What are your thoughts on what I've just said about the future of new coal-fired power plants?
Sure, it definitely appears to be quite challenging. Just to clarify, what the information I provided earlier was on the standards on existing units, which are able to get to the lower standards by purchasing these credits for getting their formula-based rate lower. I think we're getting some information now about the cost of CCS through the Kempler County project in Mississippi that's coming in quite high, quite expensive. That's an IGCC.
Did you see the news release today?
I have. Right, it seems to be quite challenging to achieve that. So unless they find a way to meet that, I think it's going to be very difficult. I think there's other reasons why it's difficult already. Even if you don't have that standard, it's an expensive on a capacity basis. Will be expensive with more emission standards coming, and I think at a business risk standpoint, I don't know who would be willing to take on that risk. I think there's a few that are in development. I don't know what their plans are going forward, but it does appear to be challenging.
I just want to say, sorry.
No.
One thing on carbon capture, we actually have to now call this science fiction, right? And let's be honest about this, which is we are very dependent upon coal. Obviously, other countries are as well, and so it would be fantastic if we could sequester the carbon from coal plants. And largely, the efforts over the last couple of years have been, a bone thrown to the dog of the coal industry that said, "Can you get this figured out?" Right? Can you get this figured out? And it hasn't happened, right? And meanwhile, we have alternative choices that are have become much more cost competitive. And so that's the market has spoken, I think.
And even loan guarantees from the DOE, I don't believe have received adequate interest for significant
capital.
significant subsidies for innovation in this area. I don't know if there was a second round. I don't know, Bill, if
So there is no such thing as clean coal.
Well,
for CO2.
I think we are going to move on to the next item on our agenda. So I want to take this opportunity to once again thank all of our panelists, and I know they're all willing to talk with you individually later on.